Hey, Nerd Herd, Dynasty Nerds here, back again. This week, talking about contenders and rebuilders. Where do you stand? There's no place worse to be than being stuck in the middle. We're going to talk about what to do if you're either a contender or you're a rebuilder.
Don't pretend, Garrett.
Oh, all I do is win, homie.
I'm pretending I'm awesome.
Ready, set, hut, hut. Welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast, where we discuss dynasty strategy, rankings, and all things NFL. So get ready to geek out on fantasy football with your host, Rich Dotson.
And welcome to the Dynasty Nerds Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Rich Dotson, and my fellow nerds, Matthew O'Hara.
Hey.
And Gareth Price.
I almost forgot we were on
My
camera.
name got changed again.
I was dancing a little
Thufferin'
bit.
Thuckatash. I was in light of Space Jam coming out. That was my Sylvester the Cat.
So excited about that.
Oh, I am 0% excited about it.
Well, but that's the generation gap.
We are.
I was 6 when that came out.
Here's the deal. And I was just talking to my daughter about this today because she brought home a Space Jam, toy from McDonald's with LeBron dunking. And I was like, this is amazing. This is great. I was like, but Space Jams, when I was a kid, first of all, I was a little bit too old. And second of all, it was Michael Jordan who used to kill the Cavaliers every year and knock us out of the playoffs. I wasn't going to watch a movie with that jerk in it.
Yeah, and do kids even know who Looney Tunes are these days? My kid, if you ask my kid who Daffy Duck is right now, he'd be like, I have no idea. He might know who Bugs Bunny is, but they don't know who Elmer Fudd is. They don't know who, the rooster. Oh, my goodness. Not Colonel Sanders.
I can't remember. I can't remember. It's
Definitely
not Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, but I was wondering. I told my wife, I was like, do the kids even know who the Looney Tunes are?
I don't think they are, but this will make them relevant again.
He did have a southern draw, right? The rooster?
Yeah. Well, I do.
Foghorn Leghorn.
Oh, yeah.
Foghorn Leghorn.
But I do. To the point, too, I don't even know my kids will, really know who Daffy Duck is.
They won't care. It has brawn.
Yeah. Is Daffy Duck on TikTok? Because then my kids don't know that. Yeah. So, but that's what we're talking about today. We're not talking about LeBron. We're not talking about Looney Tunes. We're talking about our own Looney Tunes, and that's dynasty players. Because these people out here, they're a little loony.
That wasn't your best.
It was not even close to my
No.
best. It was actually my worst thing I've probably
Where's the
2021? Yeah,
There
thank
you
you so
go.
much for that. So today we're talking about contenders and rebuilders / reloaders / pretenders. So what to do, how to manage your teams.
All those things are the exact same apparently.
/
Yeah. Well, somebody call it rebuilding. I like to call it reloading.
And pretender?
You said pretender earlier. That's just going off your
I
dumb
was
word.
just saying contender, pretender. They rhyme.
Oh, all right, Dr. Seuss. But before we get into any of that, we got to tell you about our friends at Manscaped. That's right, our great friends at Manscaped. Listen, summer is here, right? And right now, everybody's
Dynasty
looking
summer.
good. They're tanning up. They're looking very good. But guess what happens when you drop those draws? You're not so tan. It's like the sun's shining right back out on you right now. You don't want those curly clouds blocking the view. And right now, you got to use that Manscaped right now. They have the Manscaped 4.0. That's right. You heard me. The 4.0. It's a perfect complement that rest of the tan body. Not that little solar white area underneath. And it doesn't matter. It's very pale down there. Very pale.
Looks like it's going to rain. Look at those curly clouds.
There's no way to get tanner if you got the curly clouds blocking the view. You got to bonsai that bush, people. And if you want to have a good summer, you got to do it right. You got to use the Manscaped 4.0 lawnmower. Again, this is a fantastic tool. Everybody at Dynasty Nerds has this tool, and as far as I know, everybody uses it. The Manscaped 4.0. It's fantastic.
Check me off.
Every time I go out with a new Manscaped product, I use it. I enjoy it. My significant other enjoys it. My wife enjoys it too. And this is
Wait.
We're like real slow on the come up
It
there.
took me a second there.
So you guys figured it out. But I mean, this is a tool that does a lot of great things. 7,000 RPM motor. I mean, that thing's humming. I mean, you could be an assassin or a sexy midsection. Whatever you want to use it for, this tool will help you out. Even though it doesn't cut skin because it's got that skin safe technology. I mean, if you get lost, there's an apocalypse, and you still want to look good, and there's no light, 4,000K LED light right there for you. It's going to show you the way.
It's very bright.
To the promised land.
4,000K?
That's what it says here. Turns into 4,000K LED spotlight.
I don't even know what that means.
The
It
amount
seems
of
like a lot.
lumens in an LED light.
Yeah,
The
LED.
amount of lemons?
Dude, you want a
Not
precise
lemons.
shave.
Lemmings?
No lemons. No,
Color
no.
temperature.
Yeah, the lemmings.
It's waterproof. It's got the 360-degree blade rotary there. This thing does so much. But listen, it's a simple concept, people. You want to go out there and you want to have besides killing and crushing the dynasty game, you want to be crushing your love life, right? And to crush, you don't need any soft landing, right? You got to make sure that you bring it down. You got to bring it down a hair. You got to make sure that, what do you say, Matt? If the tree's going to look good, don't cover it up with weeds. Make the garden look good.
Yeah, once you trim the whole grass and everything, you can't leave the trees unweed whacked. You got to get in there, clean those things up a bit, make everything look nice.
Do you think anybody would respect Mr. Miyagi's wax on, wax off, or whack? He wants to do it.
Nope.
If he wasn't bonsaiing that bush.
Sorry, Manscaped.
Manscaped. Get out there, do it. And right now, we have a tremendous offer so you too can succeed, not only your dynasty game, but your love life and your own personal life. That's 20% off with free shipping with the promo code NERDS. That's right, 20% off and free shipping to promo code NERDS. Check out their wide array of selections. They have the new Weed Whacker 4.0, the nose trimmer, the gels and lotions they have. I'm telling you, I've never said this before in the podcast, but they have this lotion. It smells terrific.
I think you have said it. I think you have mentioned the
You
lotions.
mentioned something about your 10-year-old, and
It smells that good.
it got weird.
What is wrong with you?
It got weird real quick.
I mean, that's basically referencing this every show.
20% off and free shipping. Use the promo code NERDS. Let's talk about contenders. So now, what do we talk about being a contender? Well, it's simple. How do you manage your team as a contender? Well, the simple answer here for being a simple question is, well, you just go win the whole damn thing, right? That's what you do. You go out there and win.
Adios.
But, I mean,
That's really simplifying it, I think.
it's easy to say I'm going this year like I'm a contender. How many tweets do we get? How many messages do we get saying, "Hey, I'm a contender. What's your advice?" Well, you can't just say go out there and win. So let's sit here and talk about some advice we can give to contenders, and then we'll flip the script.
What even is a contender? Let's start with that, because I don't even know that people always know whether or not they're actually a contender.
Yeah, like Rocky 1, was he a real contender? It wasn't until Rocky 2 or 3 till he was a contender.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it takes process. There's a process here.
He didn't know that it was a show. Rocky.
This guy. What's a contender, Matt?
If he dies, he dies.
He dies. I mean, in my opinion, you have to have difference makers at probably 3 positions throughout your lineup, and you have to be a top 2 or 3 player, no doubt. It can't be you're squeezing into the playoffs or you're the bottom part of the playoffs. You really have to be one of these top 3 teams, in my opinion, to be a bona fide contender. And you have to be able to look at yourself and be like, nope, that team's not better than, nope. And you have to be able to say that honestly about 9 times before you're actually a contender.
And not even just that. Sometimes you might be in the top 3, but it's like a real murky top 3 where there's really like 4 or 5 teams there that are about the same. And then there's 1 or 2 that are just absolute studly teams, and your team's not one of them. So you might be 3rd, but there's 2 teams that you have no chance of beating. You're not a contender.
Then you're still not a contender, even if you're 3rd in that, instance.
So I think you have to really look at the entire landscape. Just because your squad is good in a vacuum doesn't mean you're a true contender
But
in
you're
your
close because you're 3rd. And just like last year, you never know. They could have easily had Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley on the team. That team's unbeatable. By week 3, that team is going to end up with a 3rd overall pick. You know what I mean? So,
But you don't want to bet that week 1.
No, you don't want to bet at week 1, but you're always contending to win. So the 2 things that both these teams have in common is you still have the same goal. When you play Dynasty Fantasy Football, just like redraft football, we all have one goal, and that is to win a championship. That's a number 1 goal here. Both topics we're going to talk about is how do we get to win a championship, because that's all that matters. So, yeah, you're going to be in some leagues where there's teams that they seem unbeatable. So how do you get in that level, right? Like any given Sunday, right? Those teams will probably have a first-round bye, so they're only going to play 2 games. So you just have to catch that team with 1 good week. So you have to acquire players, like Matt said, difference makers, right? I always believe, I've talked about it for 7 years now, that I think the tight end position's a difference maker position, right? You can get the edge there. Matt mentioned having guys that are difference makers at different positions, like a good solid core, and be able to look at these teams and say you could beat them. I think another thing here when you're a contender, that's the easy part. Looking at the main core of your starting lineup and saying this team could beat any team on any given day. That's the main point. But there's more to that too, because it's maintaining the team. I think when you're a contender, it's easy to become complacent. And it's easy to sit on that team and say, I don't have to do anything because this team's so good. But we mentioned before, Saquon, Christian McCaffrey could happen. I think it's important when you're a contender is to figure out how to make small trades and how to acquire guys that aren't necessarily starters, but guys that you could fill in, flex spots, injuries that can get you by, whether it be a backup quarterback, maybe it's an older running back that somebody doesn't want, maybe it's a PPR running back like Nyheim Hines. Target those teams that are reloading or rebuilding and see what some of those older assets are on their team that you can get for second-round picks, third-round picks. And I encourage all contenders, that's what I encourage, spend those draft picks. The least amount of value that second-round, third-round picks, any of those picks have are when you're a contender. Those are almost meaningless picks. So you want to use those to acquire guys that you hope you never need to start. And so it could be almost of a waste to pick in somebody's eyes, but if they're there when you need them, it's going to be super, super valuable. A guy like a Samaje Perine last year would have helped you win a championship in your championship game last year when he scored 23 points. And maybe at the time you had to give up a third-round pick for him. Is Samaje Perine worth a third-round pick? Absolutely not. But if you own Joe Mixon and you would have made that trade for Samaje Perine, he would have helped you win a championship during the championship game with his 23 points.
Right. At the end of last year, specifically when Joe Mixon was out, he was then worth a third round. And that's when you have to take, the opportunity to kind of cash in on some of these guys that have small windows of value. But for a contender, they could make all the difference between, winning the championship and getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs.
One of the things that I think can be an easy mistake is I think a lot of times contenders don't always look forward far enough, because a lot of times a lot of the deals aren't made until the trade deadline, which is fine. Sometimes you need to evaluate your team, see where it's at and all that. But that is when you are paying the most expensive cost to get these veteran players. If you know you're a contending team at your team's rookie draft, you already know you're a contender, try to make some of those moves for the depth pieces, or if you need one more star at running back because you're stacked everywhere else.
That's when you can really cash in on a guy like Chris Carson or something like that, because maybe his value is a little bit depressed just because he's getting a little bit older. Who knows if there's there's a lot of uncertainty.
Somebody really wants Elijah Moore.
Exactly. And the young hotness is looking really good at that point.
So I think that's one of the biggest mistakes contenders make is they wait too long to think about their trades, and now they're mortgaging their entire future, which sometimes it's worth it to do that, but 4 months earlier, you would have had to pay half of that cost to get the exact same player. So I think you need to think about the life cycle of a dynasty season when you're doing this as well to help maximize your value overall.
Yeah, this is another reason why the Dynasty GM on dynastynerds.com is such a great tool. We try to focus that tool to find every area of dynasty to help you along the way. And the League Analyzer is a great point here because it's going to show you the strengths of your team from an outside perspective. And maybe it will tell you, hey, your weakest position here, and maybe you have George Kittle. So you feel like, I have George Kittle, but I'm good. I have Darren Waller, I'm good. I'm Travis Kelce, I'm good. But it tells you that's your weakest position. Okay, well, who's a little bit stronger there? That's fine. I'm going to start Travis Kelce every single week, but obviously if something goes wrong there, I still want to try and win the ship. So where can I go out there and get some help, right? Maybe I try and acquire some guys that have some upside, like an Anthony Ferkser, right? Or somebody who's
Tyler Higbee.
Somebody whose value's dropped off completely, like a guy like Austin Hooper, who might bounce back a little bit and get for super cheap. Got moves like that just to acquire depth, to make sure you have a lot of players on your roster to help you get by, because it's always going to be a rocky season. And now that we're expanding the season to an 18-game season, which means your regular season going from week 13 to week 14, it just increases the odds of guys either sitting later in the season, getting ready for the playoffs, or being hurt either way. And the team being extra precautionary to make sure they could be healthy for the playoffs, which would not be your playoffs at the time. It's when you're going to need them the most. So making small moves, to me, is very important, because everybody in Dynasty is always trying to make the big move, but a lot of times it's the small moves that you make that can pay huge dividends down the road when you're trying to make a push.
Yeah, I mean, in years past, there's been guys like Frank Gore and stuff like that, that the aged veteran that just seems to get passed around in Dynasty circles, but, obviously, he doesn't hold value anymore, so I guess it's not a relevant name. But he was able to win you games late in the season just because he was always there. He was like old reliable, basically. And so you have to find the modern day version of a Frank Gore or one of these type of guys to kind of get you over the hump and just through games sometimes. Just a startable
A guy like Kareem Hunt, who doesn't have a super high ceiling with Nick Chubb there, but week in, week out, he's probably going to get you around 10 points. And that could be the difference in when somebody goes down, somebody gets hurt. And I think in the playoffs, that's one thing I want to make sure I have is at least one startable backup at every position, because once you get to the playoffs, if somebody gets hurt, you can't make a trade anymore.
Right, you're done.
And that player's not sitting on the waiver wire. So you just blew your season because you weren't willing to give up your 3rd round pick to get Nyheim Hines to make sure that you had enough startable depth at your running back position.
And Kareem Hunt is a high-end option too, because I mean, if he finds himself into a starting role because of injury to Nick Chubb or anything like that, he can win you games. Like I mean, he's very capable from that, but you're going to pay extra for that as well.
Sure,
you're not going to be getting him for a 3rd round draft pick or a 2nd round draft pick. You're probably going to have to give up a 1st round draft pick to get a guy that's serviceable for the most of the time. Exactly, but he could win you a championship. So he's worth it, in my opinion.
And don't be afraid to get ahead of it. If a guy goes down for injury and then say a guy's coming in for his backup, don't be afraid to try and get in on that player who might be a complete bust, but could turn into, like I said, Samaj GP right at the end, but a guy who might have opportunity later on that could turn into a solid player where the price will go up. So say somebody goes down, say Odell Beckham goes down, right? Well, that increases the value of whoever that 3rd receiver is, like whether it be Rashard Higgins or Donovan Peoples-Jones. Sure. Or it could be anybody in that situation. Don't be afraid to buy that player too and take that risk. I think there's another side of this too that nobody talks about is when you're a contender where, okay, I'm a contender. What do I do? How do I manage my team? That you just focus on this season because you're a contender, right? I think a really good move for a savvy contender is, how do I keep this ship sailing, right? Like, how do I maintain this ship? Like, or how do I maintain this car? Like, where you're not just going to run it into the ground and then blow it up to be a reloader, right? To rebuild this team. I think a really good dynasty owner, and I've been able to do this in some leagues, is to manage your team with expectations to win now, but always trying to win later too. Like, how can you capitalize? And a lot of that comes with, if you're a good team, you have some good depth, right? As you get closer to playoffs and your team does get healthy, and if your team is really good and you're very confident in your team, don't be afraid to sell some teams that are still trying to get into the playoffs. Because a lot of times that will work out. It's 50-50 where that team's trying to make that push to get in and they still don't get in. So you end up with a higher pick. And by that, it means, like, if you're a good team and you do acquire these small pieces and you do draft well and you get some good depth, don't be afraid to, as you get close to the playoffs, to sell off some guys you might not be able to start. Not all of them, but those should be always moves in the back of your mind as well. It's like, okay,
if you've got 4 starting running backs, someone needs a running back, and you unload a Chris Carson or something
for a 23 first.
Sure.
Right. Don't be
as long
afraid
as
to
you're
capitalize
confident
there.
that they can't beat you, because the worst would be if you gave them the piece to beat you in the playoffs.
Yeah, but again, as long as you're not confident that it's gonna make a difference maker. But you should be always confident in your team, right? Like, and you should look at it, and I think that's the biggest worry about some people. Like, oh, I can't make them better. I can't give them a player. If you think your team is good enough to win, then that's a risk you should be able to take sometimes, because that's the difference between you doing well long term and then you run the team in the ground. Because I've been able to find ways to do that where
it is a fine line.
It's a very fine line.
That you're
and I would rather do that
walking.
before the trade deadline.
But it's
personally,
it's not always teams that are like right up. I'm telling you, there's always teams in your league that are like,
if you think they're a fake, then yeah, absolutely.
Even if they get in, they don't worry you, but they're always trying to make that push, and then a running back goes down, a receiver goes down. Don't be afraid to take advantage of those players as well. And I'm not talking about like you're 1-1 and the guy 1-2, like offering him a trade.
Right.
I'm talking about those guys as you get closer, they're fighting to get in.
They're the 7th best team in the league, 8th best team in the league. They're trying to squeak their way into the playoffs.
I made tons of moves with the guys and they missed the playoffs. And more so, their future first. Like, I don't want their 22 first. Like, you go for their 23 first, right? You attack that moment. And maybe you have a guy that's doing pretty well. Or you have the guy that popped up that's temporarily good. And you can sell him for like a little draft capital. It's also about buying. It's also about selling, not just buying. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? I know I said capital wrong. It's all right.
You said capable.
I can't speak well. It's okay.
I was trying really hard not to laugh.
I know.
And then that made you laugh.
Yeah, I know.
Which
But,
made
I mean,
me
do you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's
Yes.
a fine line to, like, it's a savvy way to be good for a very, very long time. And
What
that's
do
why
I-
we talk about flipping those running backs. Same
And
thing
I-
in the offseason. You sell those running backs for future running backs.
And I am all for flipping the running backs at a certain time, but you have to know when to hold and I guess when to fold on some of these
You
guys.
gotta know when to hold.
Go ahead.
Know when to fold 'em.
Yes.
We're good.
Know when to walk away.
No,
No,
I already walked
nothing?
away.
Please,
I,
no more of
All
that.
right. Thank you.
Thank you.
But I mean,
I don't even listen to country
That-
music and any of that one.
that's something that nobody really talks about when you're contenders. Like, not just like you should always be focused on what's at hand now and what lies ahead, and that can put you in a position to be very good. Because when you're a contender, it's really hard to get good draft picks, right?
It is.
So the more draft capital you have, maybe now you have 112 and you have 1-8. Well, 112 and 1-8 is going to put you in a better position to get 1-3.
I agree with the overall concept of what you're saying. I think it's tougher to execute though.
I do as well. I have a
I've
hard.
been doing it for years.
I personally am one of these guys that I'm just going to hoard them right into the playoffs. I'm just going to hoard. I'm not going to give them to some unless it's somebody that I know that I can beat, and that's a seventh or eighth seed type of person that's trying
Sure.
to squeak their way.
But
in.
again, I'm not talking about those teams. That's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. You're not giving it to the 1-2 guy, the 1-3 guy, or the third best
Right.
guy that it's loaded.
It's
and
just
you're not giving
in the
them a depth
playoffs,
piece.
anything can happen. And I've been the 6th seed that's won. I've been the 1st seed
Don't
that's
play
lost.
scared.
Like
Don't play scared. Don't play scared. I'm just.
I would rather go all in personally.
I get that as well. It's just I think that's.
Play to win the game.
I'm not saying it's for everybody, but for me personally, that's how I've been able to. For some teams, maintain success
and
put
think
myself
you're
in a
gonna-
position to get some good young players to keep adding to my already championship caliber roster.
I think
I
that's
understand
I
the
think that's a-
concept. I'm just
and-
saying
and-
it's tougher to
but that's how you
navigate
keep it flowing too, because now when you get this young player, right? You get that young player. Now you're acquiring that depth of what I was talking about. So the only way to acquire that depth to make that move in the first place is to acquire more talented players.
Sure.
To sell off the older players. It's just like this ever-ending cycle. And then you can still buy the young players that you want. And sometimes it's players that turn into like, hey, I have Melvin Gordon. I'm buying Austin Eckler.
Sure.
Well, now I'm in a really good position where I have both those good players.
Right.
Because some of those players that you buy
They'll split off
that
and-
are like okay guys could turn out to be really good guys, give you more depth. So the small trades could turn into a big trade. You selling could turn into a big player down the road. There's a lot of ways to do it because we know when those players are making a push, they get desperate, they'll give up a little bit more. And it's just finding the right value at the right time.
That is what it's all about, and I think it's very easy to come up here and say if you have a glut at a position to sell it to the number 8 person. That's in a vacuum, right? I mean, it's harder to pull these things off.
It's all hard.
Yeah,
It's hard to win a
exactly.
championship.
It-
It's hard. It's
yep.
nothing about this is easy. There's no people watching this YouTube show or listening to this show because it's just easy. It's like you're trying to get as much information you can. This is more information to try. And you're right. Sometimes I try to do it and the trades don't go through.
Sure.
But the point is my point was if you're a contender, don't be complacent. Always be trying to make moves.
Sure.
Don't just be a buyer. Don't be afraid to be a seller as well, as my point. That's how you become a very good, well-rounded dynasty manager is you're never complacent. As soon as you get complacent, you're getting passed up. Sure. You got to be constantly making moves. And I think a lot of times what people are going to tell you as a contender is buy, 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 buy. But what I'm saying is don't be afraid as well to sell is my point.
It's got to be the right situation, but don't be afraid.
But everything's the
Yep.
right. You know what? That's my point. Though. Like everything's the right situation. Right. It's got to be the right situation to buy. It's got to be the right situation to sell. And it's all in a vacuum because some leagues are really hard to make trades in, and some are really easy to make trades in. And some have owners that are foolish and they think they can win, and some people are more realistic and they're not gonna buy anything you're selling because they know the position they are in. But it's finding the right owner. It's finding the right player. It's got to be a good fit. But it's your job as a dynasty GM and a dynasty manager to do that. It's why we build the tools that we build to help you navigate those lanes, to find the perfect spot, to give you more information to back up your stance, to let you know where your team really stands. Like it's important. It's important to put in that work. And yes, like redraft, you could luck your way into a championship because you hit on all your draft picks. Sure. You kind of lucked into it. But if you if you put the time in and you dedicate yourself like this, and you're staying at the forefront and making all these moves, odds are you're going to be a true contender and always competing for the ship for many years instead of for that hashtag 2 to 3 year window. So My point is,
So you're finding a way to freeze the pendulum in the upswing, is what you're saying, basically. But you're fighting gravity. It's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to fight gravity, right?
I feel like in our oldest league that's been going on for almost 18 years, I feel like I've found a way, for the most part, to be a contender for a majority of that 18 years than not a contender.
I agree. I would agree with that. But how many times have you won in that league?
Correct. It's hard to win.
I know.
I agree. But I have a lot of second place finishes.
Yes, you do have a lot of second place.
And it's just luck. Sometimes
luck.
you face Alvin Kamara on Christmas, like I did last year, and you get beat right then and there.
Right.
And I had a lot of this. But I feel like that's one of those leagues I'm talking about where I've always I'm always moving those running backs and making those moves and making those trades to not only acquire a young guy. I did this year. Some guy didn't want his 2-2 or something. I gave him my future first. I took Michael Carter. That's a risk. But if it's a risk that pans out, then I have another running back in my stable. It could not pan out as well. You know what I mean? That's a move I made as well. But I'm always trying to make moves, even as a contender. That's a situation I bought in.
And I think this is where you and I differ a little bit, right? Because I'm willing to go up, peak, hit it for 3 or 4 years,
and blow it all up.
Blow it up and come right back up. And that's how I do it. And I feel like I can hit a higher peak like that, where you're going to be doing this more, and I'm going to be here and down and higher and down, and you're up high, but maybe you don't quite hit the peaks that I'm going to be hitting. You're definitely not hitting any of the valleys that I'm hitting using that type of system. And
here's something nobody talks about either, because we sit here and talk about ships all the time. From a financial aspect, from
finishing in the money every year,
for finishing. Absolutely. Listen, I want the title more than anything, but for coming in second a lot of years, to say I'm up financially in that league, would be an understatement.
Absolutely,
an understatement. So even a third, in most leagues, they're going to pay you out for third place with credits, or however you pay your leagues out on. And second, as much as it sucks to come in second place, a lot of times you're getting rewarded for financially for that. So to be a contender year in, year out, and yeah, you're right. The championships don't always come that way, because I can sit here and say I faced Alvin Kamara, or this happened, or this player got hurt. Yeah. But from a financial aspect of it too, there's a lot of rewards by being in that swing as well, and always being hungry for the ship. And there is different ways to go about it. Yeah. We're going to talk about you've done a magnificent job multiple times of blowing your team up. So you're going to have a better thing to talk about here when we get to the blow up section. But I think that's. Is
that a compliment or not?
I don't know.
No, he's done a good job. I've seen a lot of good people blow up. Right? I have a friend Colleen who in our high stakes league, she's a masterful blow up, and it's just there's a lot of different ways to look at being a contender and how to stay on top. It's like you mentioned, don't be afraid to sell. Sometimes when you're a contender, you can take those players. If you move the right players at the right time correctly, it's a good way to always stay on top.
Yeah,
It's listening to the Dynasty Nerds podcast and listening to those young players to buy when we say to buy at that right time as well, that maybe you only take a year off. Because there's a lot of times in that league where I'll just take a year off where I'll suck it up because I'm making some moves for some young guys that I believe in, and they got to pan out. And of course, that has to pan out too, because easily, some guys are talking Jalen Reagor and he's talking Justin Jefferson, and you listen to Jalen Reagor guy, and now you're still sitting in the basement because you tried to make that move. It didn't pan out.
It's a weird time to take a shot, but all right. But ultimately, I actually sit somewhere in between, because I would, well, not literally, but preseason, I would do a lot of what you said. Like I would be willing as a contender to move some of those players. But once I get to midpoint in the season, I'm hoarding all the best players that I possibly can. So I would probably be somewhere in between where you guys are at. Yeah. Preseason, I'd be willing to do that. During the season, I probably would.
See, that makes I see as a contender. I
want to give myself the best opportunity to win this year if I think I'm a contender.
It depends how deep your team is. But if I go into a playoff team and say I have Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara, and then my third running back's Miles Sanders, but then I also have Antonio Gibson, right? There might be, not saying I'm selling him here, or Cam Akers, for example. Say they're middle of the road. I don't know where you're at, but that might be a really good opportunity where you still have the best players that you can get a lot for Cam Akers, right? Most people wouldn't want to sell him, and yeah, you got to stay healthy, but you have Miles Sanders as the backup, that you could sell a player like that and get a significant return.
Sure.
And that significant return will help you long term. And what I'm saying is you're still not hurting your team. Yeah, you don't have the depth that you want him to get hurt, but
but you're bettering another team also. So that's where that's how I justify hoarding.
I wouldn't do it to a team that I think would legitimately beat me with that player. I would not do that. Again, that's my point though. That's what I'm trying to say is like, I'm not selling to a team that I think
I get it.
I'm selling that team because that person is in that mindset saying, if I get this player, I can win it all. But like the GM's going to tell them, we would see it like, unless they get really lucky, they're not beating me.
Sure.
But like, I'm more scared about the really good teams I'm not trading with. Right. Unless that team. I'm hoping that team doesn't even get me because I know the team they're going to end up playing. I'm not even most likely even going to play that team. You know what I mean? Like they're going to play somebody else. So they have to get lucky twice to even get to me in the first place or beat me. So I'm just telling you, that's how you get a team to stay good long term. All right, let's move on.
Well, let's move on to talking about our friends over at Prediction Strike. We're talking about when to buy, when to sell, what to do for these contending teams. You get to do some of that same type of stuff over at Prediction Strike. You get to figure out when's the right time to buy some of those players that could be superstars. You're trying to figure out when to sell those guys before they hit that cliff. A lot of the same type of things that you're doing for a contending team or a rebuilding team, you get to do over at Prediction Strike. And at predictionstrike.com, you can do all of this, but I like to do it personally on the app. They have the app for iOS. And best of all, you can sign up with the promo code DYNASTY to receive $10 free with your first deposit of $20 or more. That's promo code DYNASTY to receive $10 free with your first deposit of $20 or more over at Prediction Strike.
Gotta love the apps. Sorry.
I'm going to tell you to check out an app and a friend of ours, realitysportsonline.com. And you want to talk about an app, going to try something for free as well.
Hey.
Check out their app and try out their mock draft for free to see exactly what we're talking about. What we're talking about is with the realitysportsonline.com, the number one auction site in the world today when it comes to fantasy football and dynasty fantasy football. This is a site that's going to give you an opportunity to be that real general manager in football, where it's not just about who you draft, it's about maintaining salaries in your league. That's what an auction league is. You bid on money and how much you want to pay this player and how many years you want to pay them for. This is what Reality Sports Online does. It's a different way to play Dynasty Fantasy Football. And as you become a bigger fan of Dynasty, there's different ways you want to play. And I know I got friends like John Bosch who swears by auction. It's the only way he wants to play. He thinks it's the only way to play Dynasty. And there's thousands of people like him. Mm-hmm. And this is the platform that Reality Sports Online gives you. They have free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, the franchise tags, first-round options, automated contracts, functionality, and so much more. I know it sounds complicated. It's not. And it's easy to go test your mettle with that free mock draft that they have and see how it works. And I encourage everybody to try that first before you get into it. And once you do, I promise it's going to be a new way to play that you're absolutely going to love. And right now, you can use the promo code NERDS and get 10% off your team or your league today. That's a really good discount on an entire league. Check them out. See if you like it. I promise you will. Give it a chance. Reality Sports Online, promo code NERDS, 10% off. Reality Sports Online. Fantasy just got real with realitysportsonline.com. Now, rebuild mode.
Flip
right?
the script.
Reloading. Matt, tell us how you like to manage a team that whether you've been stuck in the middle or you're ready to blow it up. Because we didn't mention this in the beginning of the show either, is there's no place worse to be than the middle. And this is where the Dynasty GM helps you. It tells you if you're stuck in the middle. You need to be either a contender or you need to be rebuilding, reloading. One of the two. So whether you're stuck in the middle or you've won a couple of championships in a row and you feel good about it and you know a good draft class is coming up and you're just ready to blow this up and start anew, tell them how you feel, how you make that decision, Matt, how you come to that decision, and then how you kind of execute as well.
Yeah. I mentioned the pendulum earlier. You have to know kind of when you're on your backswing, when you're headed up to the championship as well. But you also have to kind of get a feel for when your window at that level is closing and you're starting to swing back down. And you don't want it to swing back down too far because that's when your whole team has crumbled and it's become decimated. You got no good assets. So it's when it starts swinging down and you realize that there's some other teams. We talked about this. There's some other teams maybe making a move. They're coming together. And you can kind of see that their window is starting at the same time yours is going down. That's when it's time to start taking an honest look at your team. You look at the guys that are 28-year-old wide receivers, prime of their career, but by the time you start swinging your way back up, they're going to be useless assets. And that's the places that you start there. The running backs obviously are the ones that we always want to sell. And you know, I'm okay even going through a pendulum swing and probably holding on to tight ends and quarterbacks because they're longer term type of assets. And you know, aside from George Kittle and some of these top guys, there's not a lot of value there to be traded away. But I mean, if you get a guy, a Hunter Henry at the right time, you want to start selling those guys as well. But you have to be honest with yourself and identify that you're on the way down, and that's how I do it. And then you start right at the top with your best players that are aged. You don't want to there's no reason to get rid of a 24-year-old wide receiver at that point that you have, but anyone that's 25, 26, those are the guys that you start looking at, and anyone that's 28 and above, you're absolutely unloading it from your team right away in a rebuild.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. A lot of my rebuilds start the same way. You had a good team, it was fun, and it's just probably not going to all come together anymore. Yeah. And chances are I'm probably willing to get out a year too early on a couple of these players, and depending on position, specifically running back, we hammer that home a lot, but I'm going to probably sell a running back a year too early than a year too late because they go from Dalvin Cook's worth 3 firsts right now. If he turns into Todd Gurley next year, we don't expect that, but we've seen it happen with Todd Gurley. You know, we've seen it happen with Melvin Gordon. We've seen it happen with a lot of these running backs where they go from worth tons to you can't get a second round pick for him.
The difference between a running back that's 25, 26 and 27, 28, and the value is just it's bonkers.
Astronomically different.
It is bonkers. They are just astronomically different, like you were saying.
Yep. So I'm very much in the same boat. The two main things you're going after, and you mentioned it, you're looking at young players, young assets that you can build around, and draft picks. The most difficult part about rebuild is most of the pieces you're dabbling with are going to be unproven.
All risk. You're going to have a lot of risk.
You're going to have a lot of risk. The great part about rebuilds is you get the opportunities to snatch up value wherever you can. Mm-hmm. And that's what's really fun, because if you're a contender, a lot of times you're going to have to overpay to get that piece to help put you over the top. Well, the opposite end of that is you get to sell we've mentioned his name a couple times, a Chris Carson, for probably a little more than he's worth. And now you got a first and a second for Chris Carson in a class that you love and, whatever it is. So you can't just build around one or the other. You need to have some good young assets that are Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lambs, guys like that. Or if it's super flex, you have Justin Herberts, Joe Burrows, young cornerstone pieces that you can really build around. But you're going to have to take some risks with these picks as well, because you're not going to be able to just acquire young players because they're too expensive. Everybody wants young, talented players. You're going to have to take some risks, but gobble up value wherever you can.
And we mentioned it on the podcast quite a bit, but I think for this section, I think we should mention it again. Start with the quarterbacks, start with the wide receivers, start with these long-term and the tight ends, because these are the guys that take a little bit of time in the NFL to kind of come into their own and kind of flourish into a major role in any kind of offense for the most part, and their long-term assets. And then towards the end of your rebuild, that's when you fill in with the running backs. I just wanted to at least put that out there and say it, because I felt like we should.
What do you guys do when you're blowing up your team and you got some players on your roster and you just got to get rid of them? They're a little bit older. They're at 29, 30 years old. Guys like, say you have an Adam Thielen, for example, right? Probably going to be a wide receiver 1. You're putting his name out there. You know the cliff's coming here soon. You know the value's about to take a big dip probably after this season. Going to 2022, it'll be worth significantly less. And you're putting him out there in your league, and nobody's biting. Are you guys willing to just put him out there continually to the trade deadline and then eventually are you willing to just take the best offer you can get?
That's a tricky one. If you think the player has another year, no. But if you think that cliff is that close, then yeah, you take whatever.
Let's use him specifically. Adam
Thielen,
who maybe has 2 more years, but it's a big maybe, right? It's a
Sure.
big maybe. They're trying hard to get rid of Kirk Cousins here. He could be a cap casualty. We know what's going to happen to that. Like you have Kirk Cousins, and the best, or you have Adam Thielen. You blew up everything. You're still stuck with Adam Thielen here. It's a super flex league. The best offer you got is a 22-second and a 23-second.
I'm doing it.
I would do it, and but I'm waiting till the last possible second.
And I might even make an announcement. Hey guys, I'm getting rid of Adam Thielen. End of the week is the deadline. Best trade gets him.
And sometimes that works out really well because you
I
start
always do that.
bidding wars between
Exactly.
people. And yeah.
Yep. So that's
I
how I would
always
handle
do
it.
that.
Yep.
Like if I can't get a verbal player, I say, hey guys, let you know this is on the clock. I'm getting rid of him no matter what. So the best offer I get will come in, and then usually it does create a slight uptick in value for offers wise.
Garrett did that in a league that we're in together, and he would text out a leaderboard every time a new trade came in.
I would literally tell people like, "Oh, good offer, but you're in 3rd out of 5. Sorry." Like, and so like I'd update it. So like my offer's only the 3rd best. Okay, I got it. It actually worked out really well.
That's a real good idea too, though. Like
You got
make
a
it
boatload.
Yeah, I mean the point is about that is work hard at it. Like when you're blowing it up, like that's how I said work hard at the when you're a championship, right? Like the opposite side is when you're reloading. There's no easy part of this game. I mean, Dynasty's 365 days a year. You got to work hard in the offseason to study for these rookies. You got to work hard in the summer because that's a slow period.
Dynasty summer.
But sometimes that's an easy time to make some trades as well. And then in season,
Couple cocktails here, a couple cocktails there. All of a sudden, you got a
snoozing.
deal.
And a summer in the dead period's a good period to start laying some groundwork. Like, hey, not right now, but as we get close, as the season comes along, like, is there any players that you might be interested in on my roster if if it works out for you?
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. Start setting groundwork, like in this reload. If you're gonna blow it up, like start making offers. Like, don't wait until mid-season. Right. Like if you know you're gonna blow it up, like start targeting players that you want to target. Maybe somebody took somebody in the rookie draft that you really want. Well, guess what? Rookies start off slow.
Because this is an addition by subtraction type of thing. If you have an aged veteran that's just going to help you win games, get him off your roster. You know what I mean? So yeah, it is. That's part of the theory as well. Is to clear off some of these guys to make sure that you. I mean, I don't want to say that you're tanking because I don't like that.
I was
term,
actually just going to ask. So finish your thought, but I want to ask about that.
If I have the good players, I'm going to start them like no matter what. So there's no real tanking in the way that I think go about it.
I agree.
If you're unloading your team and you don't have great assets to start, then your team's going to be worse, and no one can say that you're tanking. Your team stinks. You're building for the future. You're not trying to win this year, but you literally can't win week in and week out with the roster that you have.
So what is your guys' thoughts on actually tanking where you might not start a full lineup, or you're intentionally putting a guy that you know isn't going to get any points? How do you guys feel about that?
I had somebody bring this up to me on they were very upset in one of the Nerds leagues because I was not trying to win.
Right.
And on my taxi squad, I had Joe Burrow. And I was starting a quarterback that wasn't as good as Joe Burrow on a weekly basis on my starting roster. And they're like, well, how is that not tanking? If you have a player on your taxi squad, you're not starting. I was like, because he's not on my active roster. I was like, and honestly, to bring him up, I have to cut a player. So who are you to tell me what player I have to cut?
And that's a very gray area, I would say.
We talked about it before. It is a gray area. So, but like my definition is tanking is if there's anybody on your active roster that you should be starting over somebody else, and you're not starting them. And again, it's clear cut, not like something close. Then you're tanking. That's not cool. If there's somebody on your taxi squad that you could start, and you're starting somebody who's like you're starting somebody who has almost 0 points, and you have Jonathan Taylor on your taxi squad, that's not cool. You know what I mean? Like, but if you have Nyheim Hines starting on your roster who's scoring, he's like a running back 2, and you have a running back 1 on your roster, like I'm okay with that because that's your right as a taxi squad. Because I never tell anybody to cut anybody. Like I'm not, as another owner or a GM, I have no position to tell you, hey, you have to cut
Joe Blow.
Mike Williams.
Yeah,
because he's not that good.
Joe Blow. Whoa. You trying to start a fight with me?
Okay, here we go. Or
Subtle,
or just
very
somebody way down the lower, a guy like for the Browns, for example, like Rashard Higgins.
Okay.
Right? Like, hey, well, you can cut Rashard Higgins and bring him up. Like, I don't want to cut Rashard Higgins.
Let's go even deeper. Like somebody that you just see as like a totally developmental. Hakeem Butler just went from wide receiver to tight end. Like that. He has literally almost no shot at doing that. But who am I to tell you that you have to cut Hakeem Butler?
Because what happens if it does pan out?
Maybe you think he's the next Darren Waller. And he's making this transition from wide receiver to tight end. Who am I to tell you? So that's where it gets gray.
It does get gray. And you can't cross that line because if it goes bad once, your whole league's ruined.
Exactly.
Your whole league's ruined for it. So to me, tanking is who's on your act. Don't worry about taxi squad. You know, the taxi squad's there for a reason. Who's on your active roster? And don't tank. Like I said, you got to start them on there. And another thing I think you could do there with a player like that is don't be afraid to try and just manipulate the draft. Where we talk about this all the time. Like, okay, God, he's offered me 2 seconds. Okay, what if I give you Adam Thielen and you give me your 23 first and I'll give you my 22 second and you give me your 23 first and third. You know, because like, hey, it's going to be a late third. And I'm going to have a high second, so it's probably going to offset, and it's a year ahead from now anyways. Like, I'm willing to do that too, just to move up a couple spots, because a couple spots is a huge difference when it comes to rookie drafts.
We've talked about that before.
Yeah, so to me, it's something like that as well with those kind of players. Tanking's a weird situation.
It is.
Never encourage it. If it's blatant, it's bad.
I would highly recommend your league get something in place before the season starts to clearly identify what is and what is not tanking, because smart owners are going to try to manipulate whatever they can.
And that's the thing. You can do it without obviously tanking. Like, you can tank without blatantly tanking. Like, you can make it a legal tank, essentially.
One of my favorite moves last year, and there's players like this every year, I traded for a bunch of Dak Prescott last year on teams that weren't contenders because he's hurt. He can't help a contender. He's not playing this year. So I had quite a few shares of Aaron Rodgers that I traded for Dak Prescott, and I might have had to give a little bit more on top, but still, like, it wasn't much. Long term, I had great value, but Aaron Rodgers was the MVP last year. He won some people some championships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Made a lot of sense for them, but it made even more sense for me to acquire a young stud on a rebuilding team. So those kind of moves, like trading for injured players, sometimes can be a great ticket for a rebuilding team.
It's a great move for a rebuild team when guys go down, they're out for the year, especially early. For a team that wanted to compete, and you give them guys that are close to value, but not as good.
Saquon Barkley was another one last year.
Yeah, say you give up a guy who nobody pops in my head off the top of my head that's doing well, but like you trade a guy, maybe he's a little bit older, maybe he's not as good, but you're upgrading there
like
at that position.
A Melvin Gordon.
That probably wouldn't get it done.
I think another trade I actually legitimately made last year was I traded Nick Chubb, who's a very good running back.
Sure.
But I was on a rebuild, and I traded for Saquon Barkley. Helped that contending team because they had a very good running back for the rest of the season still. I got Saquon Barkley long-term, who I would want more.
Or like, I mean, Miles Sanders last year before he got hurt. Like, hey, I'll get, as soon as Saquon went down so early, or hey, I'll give you Miles Sanders. Like, dude, that's not fair though still. Like, still a good name that you could flip for a guy like Saquon. I'm like, okay, I'll give you Miles Sanders in my second, you know? Guys along those lines that you can make moves. They just always try to upgrade your team, essentially.
Absolutely.
And every league's different. The big thing here is when you talk about this stuff, it's easy to talk about it, but you have to know your league. Mm-hmm. You got to know your league, and more importantly, you got to know your team and where you stand. Again, that's where the Dynasty GM comes into play, and DynastyNerds.com comes into play. And if you're not a Nerd Herd member, we've been saying this for a while now. Now's the time to do it. You know, August 1st, we're doing a price increase because we have a lot of tools in the pipeline here. We had a big Dynasty Nerds meeting just the other day. We have a lot of tools in development. And right now, at the price of a cup of coffee, because the price is going to go up to a price of a latte, to be honest with you. So you're going from a latte a month, but right now you get in for the price of a cup of coffee.
Dunkin' Donuts to like Starbucks.
Dunkin' Donuts is better than Starbucks. So,
price-wise.
But price-wise, August 1st, that price is going up. So even if you're somewhat interested as the season now starts to draw near, now's the best time you're ever going to have in your life to become a Nerd Herd member, because I'm telling you, the tools that we have in the pipeline to develop are going to be landscape-changing differentials. And if you don't believe us, Just sign up now and look at the tools we have now and how far we've come with these tools in just a year. With the Dynasty GM, we have the mock draft tool. And I'm pleased to announce as well to our audience, we are now about to have live ADP as well. So I've talked about this before. There's tons of sites that out there that they get their ADP because they have a couple mock drafts in the beginning of a month, and that's their ADP for the month. Well, that doesn't do me any good when news breaks that a player is hurt or somebody just got arrested or somebody got suspended. Our ADP for our Nerd Herd members will be live. And by live, I mean up to the minute accurate. Every time a mock draft finishes on a mock draft tool app, in the App Store today, which is why we encourage everybody to use the mock draft. Not only is it fun and keep you on your toes for value, but you're generating live ADP. Mm-hmm. For our Nerd Herd members, you have live ADP on the site as well. That's another tool that's coming within next week. It's going to be up on the site. And we have a lot more tools coming to pipeline. And right now, for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can get locked in for that tool. So I encourage everybody to join the Nerd Herd today. The Dynasty GM will help you so much in the season. So even if you're not a long-term person that spends money on tools, the price is so cheap right now. This is the time when you want to do it. Because once you get in this price, you're grandfathered in forever at this price.
Get grannied in.
We have a plan here, and we have a dedication at dynastynerds.com to do nothing but give back to the game and to our members and to our Nerd Herd members. And not only that, grow the game of Dynasty.
Absolutely.
Everybody that joins a member, it's not like we always say, hey, buy me a cup of coffee. That's all it costs. Buy yourself a cup of coffee. That's what we're doing here. For that $3 a month, you're reinvested in your team for long term as well. Yep. So never a better time to join the Dynasty GM. You can try it for free right now. We have a lot of stuff in the pipeline coming soon. It's going to be well worth your wait as we draw closer to the season. You get the Dynasty GM. You also get the Dynasty Nerds film room. You get the nerd scores. There's so much to go involved to make sure that you'll be in a position to dominate your leagues. Check it out today. And next week, we get into our division breakdowns. Finally.
Yep.
This is how we usually do it. This is going to take 4 weeks to do, so we'll go right into the preseason. We'll do some good ADP buys. Right before that, some good buy sells, our bold predictions, and then we're watching actual NFL football.
Oh, my goodness.
So this is it. This is the home stretch. We got 2 weeks, 14 days from today. The Browns will be in the training camp, making that Super Bowl run. So I'm very excited.
Come out to the expo.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio. It's going to be August 15th. Is it the 15th or 16th?
Yeah, 15th.
August
Sunday.
15th, Canton, Ohio. Get your tickets. Not only will all of us be there for Dynasty Nerds and more Dynasty Nerds members, you can come by, stop, say hello, but there's going to be a ton of Dynasty people out there. Our good friends at the Dynasty Trade Calculator will be there. NFL Roundtable, DLF will be there. The Ball Blast girls will be there. And so many more. National guys like Mike Clay. There's going to be so much fantasy football information there. RotoViz will be there. Tons of guys, tons of big players there. Michael Liu, Ray Garvin, big time names here that you can come and actually meet and say hello. 2 years ago before COVID, we met a ton of people out there.
Yeah,
we have some really good deals for our Dynasty Nerds members and memorabilia as well. So come by, say hello. Super cheap tickets that Bob Lung puts on here for the FF Expo. Check them out at I think it's the ffexpo.com.
It's the fantasyfootballexpo.com.
The fantasyfootballexpo.com for your tickets.
Yep,
Check them out.
$25.
That's it. And you get so much swag and stuff there for $25. It's well worth your wait. You get to see what everybody has at their fingertips. And
you get to interact with your Twitter timeline in person.
Yeah, essentially. Almost everybody in the Dynasty game will be there. Dynasty Trades HQ, Michael Sipes, Shane, they will all be there. They have a list on the website to show you all the analysts that will be there as well. Yeah. I know a ton of analysts that are coming that aren't even on the list. They're just coming back and talk
Staying
everybody.
out.
Like I said, it's like your Twitter timeline in real life. And you'll see, like, I'm more than happy in person to talk about some of the stuff we have coming up in our roadmap and to encourage you why to jump on there.
Ooh,
and we'll have some
saucy.
good deals.
They have a package on here for $65 if you want to make it a weekend. Come, you get a ticket to the Pro Football Hall of Fame and stuff. So,
and that night ticket in that
That's pretty
package too. That's where all the big guys from the Kings Classic, they're at the bar to go have drinks with. That's the Mike Clays, the Bob Lungs,
Brad Evans.
the Bob Harrisons. Brad Evans will be there. There's tons of big time names at that event as well. So check it out. I look forward. Hopefully everybody can make it out there and come say hello and wear a nerd shirt. I'll throw you a high five.
Ew.
We'll have tons of nerd shirts and swag to give away. So can't wait.
Adios.